probably good.
Quick intro, both Barrett and I are group partners at YC, so we read applications, we interview companies and work with companies doing that.
And we have, between us, seen, how many thousands of startup ideas do you think we've seen?
Oh, more than that, that's the first
Like
circle.
10,000 or more startup ideas. And so here's the thing, folks. The only way to know for sure if a startup idea is good is to actually like build the thing and launch it and work on it for years. And there's always surprises when it comes to startup ideas. That said, people like me and Diana, who spend a lot of time looking at startup ideas, have learned some quick patterns that enable us to glance at a startup idea and at a glance tell you if it's probably good or probably bad.
Directionally, yes.
Directionally, yes. And most students, even really smart students like you, actually don't know how to do this, but it's actually pretty easy. And in less than 30 minutes, we are going to teach you how to do what we do. And this way, when you guys are interested in doing a startup, you can apply the same filter to your own ideas.
And you'll hopefully be on the way to building a big company without having to take too much of the winding road.
Yeah. It's going to be highly interactive. But before we jump into the interactive portion, I just want to clarify what we mean by a startup idea. A startup idea is an idea that could form the foundation for a huge company, like the next Airbnb or Stripe or Dropbox or something, the kind of thing that you would like apply to Y Combinator with. There's a lot of great ideas out there for projects or like just like interesting stuff to build that don't make great startups, and like that's not what we're talking about here. So, for example, a lot of you are working on hackathon ideas right now, and what we're going to find out is a lot of hackathon ideas don't make great startup ideas. But that doesn't mean that you should like switch ideas for your hackathon. Like hackathons are solving for a different problem. There's a lot of great hackathon ideas.
I think it's great to build the muscle on how to ship products. And the reality for startups, the bottleneck is really not ideas, it's really having fantastic teams. And we're here at MIT, and I heard the engineering song, and that's the spirit. That's a cool song.
Cool. All right. Let's jump right in, and we are going to actually try telling whether startup ideas are probably good or probably bad. And here's how this is going to work. We're going to give you a startup idea, and then everyone is going to vote. Probably good, probably bad. Got it? It's that simple. Yeah. Probably good or probably bad. So we're going to do a few, and then we're going to give you some like rules of thumb, and then we're going to go backward and we're going to do some more. Okay, an app to discover new restaurants in your city. Probably, hey, you guys are pretty good.
Good.
Wow, I'm impressed. Okay.
Next one.
Payroll provider for construction.
Oh yeah, okay. You could be a YC partner.
A co-pilot for firmware engineers. Yeah. Chrome extension that lets you comment on any website. Yeah. This is like much better than I expected.
We came to the
Like
right school.
right out of the gate. Okay. Let's talk about how you guys know which startup ideas are actually good or bad. Here are 5 signs of probably good ideas. These like do not 100% predict whether ideas are good, but basically, if your idea has any of these signs, it's a lot more likely to be good. So let's go through them. First sign, you're working on a really hard problem. So something like OpenAI, which came out of Y Combinator, that's a great example of that. OpenAI, like, literally, they're trying to invent artificial intelligence. It's hard to like
solve AGI.
Yeah,
Like
right.
how many people in the world can do that?
Yeah.
And they went through YC.
Yeah. Hard to think of a harder problem than that. So like startups that are tackling really hard problems are often good ideas. This is incidentally one reason why most hackathon ideas don't translate into great startup ideas, because like hackathons are solving for a thing that you can build in 24 hours, and like that's sort of the opposite of this. Stuff that is related to existing successful companies. Most great startup ideas, like there's some existing company, it's not that it's a direct competitor to that, but it's like related to it. So like for example, Brex, who knows Brex? So Brex makes like credit cards for startups. So if you start a startup, you're gonna need like a credit card for your startup to buy stuff that's like the startup pays for. And basically Brex is the credit card that you'll probably use. And like the reason I say Brex is related to existing successful companies is like before Brex, there were already credit cards, like this was already a thing, it's just that nobody had really done it before startups.
Everyone knows of Chase, JP Morgan, Capital One, right? All big companies and public companies that make serious revenue.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Exactly. So everybody knows that, yeah, like credit cards are kind of a big thing, right? So like most startups are like that. They're related to something that's already kind of a big thing. Ideas that are in an unsexy or easily overlooked space. So I'll bet nobody in this room has ever heard of this company called Vetco. Vetco is a $4 billion company, and if you were a veterinarian, you would know Vetco because almost every veterinarian in the US uses Vetco to like power their veterinary practice. And the cool thing about Vetco is Vetco was actually started in 2016 by two brothers who were about 24 years old, whose dad was a vet. And the idea for Vetco could have been done many years earlier.
It's not a tech problem.
It's not a hard technical problem. Like it's just that like there's basically minimal intersection between people who understand veterinarians and what their problems are, and people who like can write software and want to start startups. And so it took years for these two worlds to collide and for the right team to form that like wanted to build a startup and actually understood this problem. A lot of great startups look kind of like this. Fourth one is like a space that obviously has a lot of money in it. So who here has used Instacart to buy groceries? Yeah, so Instacart, they like deliver groceries to your house. And like Instacart is like kind of obviously a good idea because everyone has an intuitive sense that groceries are really big. Like you see grocery stores everywhere, you've all spent a lot of money on groceries. It's like pretty obvious that if you could get all of Americans to like buy their groceries on your website, that like a lot of money would be flowing through your house. And then the fifth one is stuff that's enabled by new technology. Who here is doing like their hackathon project is related to LLMs or diffusion models, AI stuff? Okay, like a third of you. Cool. So like basically anything that you build on top of ChatGPT or with LLMs or the new AI stuff would fall into this category.
Yeah, I mean,
I know other examples.
This is more examples back in 2008 when iPhone just came out. There was a lot of billion-dollar companies that got built with that, like Uber and Lyft, which is just an app on your phone, Instagram. So that time with the iPhone moment, I think now we have that with AI. So if you're building on that, you could build the next Instagram.
This is a very special moment because platform changes like this new AI stuff, they only come around every like 5 to 10 years.
Every decade.
Yeah, like there hasn't really been one since the iPhone in like 2006. That was like more than 10 years ago. And so this is a very special time because these things are like pretty rare, and this AI one is a real one. And so it's no surprise that like literally the majority of the companies in the summer 23 batch were doing an idea that basically falls into this bucket. It's like something that's enabled by LLMs and diffusion models because this new technology just unlocked a whole bunch of startup ideas that didn't make sense a year ago and are now suddenly possible.
That's a shortcut. These 5 quick tips on how to evaluate whether the idea is good.
Yeah, so any of these signs, that's good. Now we're gonna give you 2 signs that are bad. 2 flavors of probably bad ideas. So the first one is tar pit ideas. Who here has heard of a tar pit idea? Very few people. Excellent, we can explain it to you. What is a tar pit idea?
So it's called a tar pit because think of a tar in a pit, and when you drive through it, you get stuck. And it's kind of like a trap because so many founders think of these ideas, and especially as college students, you experience the problems that you want to solve. For example, like building an app that's set for travel planning, or something that you all thought about that because you experienced a problem. And there's no big company that has all these other 5 signs. And it's not for lack of trying or smart people just like you that could do it and build it. They actually build it but fail, and you don't hear about them because all these companies are dead and so many people try. So it's really survivorship bias, and it's hard to know that as a young founder and in school because you don't get to hear the stories. So it's more that it's like lots of people tried and it didn't work, and it's a very common problem that seems not solved, like travel planning ideas. And we actually have a video from Dalton and Michael on tar pit ideas on YouTube.
If you Google for tar pit startup ideas, there's like a great video on it.
Yeah, so the anti-pattern would really recommend you to watch that video. I think it's a fun one.
Yeah. The hallmark of a tar pit idea, if you're wondering, oh, how do I know if my idea is a tar pit idea? Imagine back to HackMIT 2013. If You could imagine this idea being something that a lot of people at HackMIT 2013 would have wanted to do as their startup. It's probably a carpet idea. Because basically, it's an idea that lots of college students would have had 10 years ago and would have had every year since then, and nobody has done it successfully yet. Turns out there's probably a reason why. Typically, it's because there's like a structural reason why the idea is like much harder to do than it seems.
Survivorship bias. I mean, you guys all know about how this bias was made from the airplanes in World War II. All the planes that came back had all these bullet holes just on the wings, and then we reinforced the wings. But then they didn't look at all the planes that died where they got bullet shots on the engine, and nobody knew about reinforcing the engine, which is actually the right thing to do in World War II until they figured that out. But they only observed and reinforced just the wings, but it was the engine. So that's basically what carpet ideas are.
Okay, and then the second typical bucket of probably bad startup ideas are solutions in search of a problem. A SISP, as we like to say.
We have an acronym.
We have an acronym. What is a SISP?
A SISP is basically, I mean, some of you might do a little cool research in here. It's like, wow, this is really cool tech. Like, let's say brain-computer interfaces, and we want to like apply it and try to build a business around it.
Stuff from the MIT media.
Sometimes, yeah.
A lot of SISPs come out of the MIT.
You're doing very direct and honest. But yeah. I mean, it's cool stuff, by the way. I mean, there's a reason it's like, it's fun, but does it really make a good business? Do people really want it?
Yeah.
Other than just play with it one time.
Okay. Here's a fun little exercise for us to do. Raise your hand if you know most of these companies. Okay, basically all the hands. Okay, let's try this again. Raise your hand if you know most of these companies.
Yeah, only like 5%.
Yeah. So here's what's going on here, folks. These are YC's most successful consumer companies. These are YC's most successful B2B companies, meaning their customers are other companies, not consumers. These companies are just as big and valuable as these companies, but you've never heard of these ones. And this is one of the most common sort of like tricky psychological things when students in particular come up with startup ideas. This is basically the phenomenon. The startups that you can easily name, like Instacart and Reddit and DoorDash, and they're like 80% of them are probably consumer companies, because that's what you use. Like, you are the user of consumer companies. But if you look at YC's billion-dollar companies, or just billion-dollar startups in general across the market, the distribution is completely flipped. It's actually like 80% B2B and only 20% consumer. And so when students apply to YC, they like often have consumer ideas because that's what they think of when they think of the startups, but actually they should be a lot more skewed towards B2B ideas, because that's where a lot more of the good startup ideas actually live. Okay, you guys ready to try some more? We can try applying some of these principles.
Now that you learn how to look at good ideas and bad ideas, we're going to do this exercise again, which you were pretty good already.
All right. Stripe for HSA FSA payments. Yeah, that's good. Why is this a good idea?
So this is like the bad code idea. It's a very esoteric space. It's like
Who here even knows what HSA FSA payments are?
Yeah.
Like nobody. But here's the interesting thing. You literally don't even need to know what they are to know that this is probably a good startup idea.
So esoteric space with healthcare benefits. Who gets excited about that? It's a very intersection of someone technical and someone super into healthcare savings.
Website to let students give feedback to their teachers.
Yeah,
Right? Like, can't you just see people from HackMIT 2013
building this?
Yeah, right?
Maybe some of you are building this. Which is cool. It's a HackMIT project. What is the startup?
Actually, this startup idea is a little bit of an Easter egg. Where does the startup idea come from? How did we come up with this one?
This is a startup that came out of MIT, and he became a $3 billion company that sold to Twilio.
But not with this idea. This was their first idea.
When they went into YC, this is what they applied with, and they went in, and they, because they were so good and such a good builder, they eventually pivoted into Segment, which is this tool, analytics tool that aggregates data all in one place, more B2B, and they built a monster company.
Yep.
So you can still succeed proceed if you get a bad idea. So, just saying.
Autonomous surgical robots.
Well, alright, some in between. So the answer is this, because it's really hard to build.
Sounds hard, right? Autonomous surgical robot? I don't know how to build autonomous surgical robot, but like anyone who's ambitious enough to try, like that seems pretty promising.
Yeah, I mean, life or death. Literally.
Literally.
You don't want to mess that one up. If you step up by a robot, it's like you get the wrong thing.
Open source observability and analytics for LLM apps.
Alright, so the answer is this. And the reason is because, as we mentioned on the last one, we are in this exciting time of AI that's enabling new use cases, and new companies like Datadog, now the version for LLMs, is a great idea and great time to build it.
Website with ratings and reviews for doctors.
Yeah, alright, pretty good.
Yeah.
There's another Easter egg.
This is another Easter egg.
So the founder of this company, who also came to, was MIT, he didn't finish. He built a company called Scale.ai. How many of you know Scale.ai?
How many of you knew that this was the original idea for Scale.ai?
This is what that client got into YC with. All right. So it's okay. It's another, but it still apply to YC, and we work with you, and we work. I mean, Jared was a good partner.
Yes.
And we work with Alex to.
I did the interview with them where they were pitching us this idea and why it was such a great idea. They were very emphatic about why this was a good idea. They're kind of embarrassed about it now. They don't talk about it.
And you work with them to get it. Right?
Yes. Instagram competitor using generative AI.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting. See, this is a tough one. We deliberately stuck in like a challenging case.
Yeah.
How would you rate this idea and why?
Well, the reason is because right now with AI is enabling all these new use cases. Plus, there's already existing big company like Instagram already making this work. And this one is another Easter egg because it's an actual YC company.
In the most recent batch that's doing super well, they might end up being the Instagram killer. And this is another example of how startup ideas that like are bad can become good when something changes in the world. Like a year ago, an Instagram competitor with, I don't know, like if someone did like, oh, we're gonna build like an Instagram competitor with a better UI or something like that, that would be like a terrible tar pit idea. But just with this like small tweak of like, oh, maybe like something has changed in the world that enables a totally new idea, all of a sudden it becomes actually a probably good startup idea.
There's a lot of cases where even some of these tar pits that we mentioned, they are tar pit maybe now, but if something changes dramatically in the world, like the assumptions and the priors,
Yes.
it might change. It could become a big idea.
Yes. Historically, we've been like reticent to talk about tar pit ideas because of this, because a lot of ideas that are tar pit ideas eventually become billion-dollar companies, but it's only when like something changes in the world that suddenly enables them to actually win.
And it requires a lot of like very custom advice that we give and curate it in the situation of the timing is very specific about the tech, what's going on, and so much about the founders on the background.
All right. Practice job interview site for college students.
Okay, how many of you are building this?
Diana added this one because she's been pitched it so many times and it's annoying her. What is wrong with this idea?
Oh, I did so many office hours with students at UPenn and CMU, and I got this pitched every time at least once.
And the interesting thing is, a lot of you probably want this product, which may be why like some thumbs went up.
Yeah.
But what's the structural problem?
So the structural problem is what we said precisely about tar pit ideas for students. Is something that you experience, and someone at MIT Hack in 2013 would have probably built this up, and it's still not solved. There's no big company built around it. There's a reason, and nothing has fundamentally changed in the technology to make this better. Even though I got pitches like, oh, LLM maybe make it different, but the reality, maybe, I mean, but still, there's the angle of whether companies really want this. I mean, there's the solving the needs of the students, but do companies want this? Who's going to pay the money?
If anyone's interested in this topic, we can go a lot deeper.
Yeah.
Structural issues in the computer industry. Anyway, native ETL for Postgres.
Yeah. You guys are pretty good. Yeah. Yeah.
Thoughts on this one?
So this one follows the one with there's big companies around the space, like Postgres, lots of databases out there, lots of data infrastructure, like solid idea. Lots of big companies around here.
There's like dozens of database companies that are
Snowflake.
billion-dollar companies. Dozens. Like you guys probably can't name them all,
Yeah.
but if you Google for like billion-dollar database companies, there's like a ridiculous number of them. So like stuff in this kind of idea space is a high hit rate. A modern NetSuite competitor. Oh, I just realized probably none of these people even know what NetSuite
So-
actually is.
Because you don't know what NetSuite is, this is actually why it's a good idea.
Exactly. Like, I'll bet no one at HackMIT is building a modern NetSuite competitor for their hackathon project.
Plus, it's so boring and
It's
it's
so
absurd.
boring. Yes, exactly.
it's
It's
one
like
of
the
those-
most boring thing ever.
Yeah, it's a good idea because none of you know it. It's pretty boring and esoteric and lots of big companies use.
It's this huge enterprise company that sells really boring enterprise software and has like a monopoly and has this old terrible software that people hate using, but they have to use it because there's no alternative. You work at a large company, they force you to use NetSuite. And this is exactly the kind of thing that makes for a great startup opportunity.
Yeah.
All right, that is our list of startup ideas. We've got a few closing notes for you, and then we'll take questions if we have time. How much time do we have?
As long as you want.
Okay. All right. So we have a few more thoughts and we'll do some questions. So first off, many of you have probably discovered in the course of this presentation that the hackathon idea that you're working on right now is not a good startup idea. And here's our advice to you. Like, don't worry about it. It probably wasn't designed to be a good startup idea. Solving different problems. Hackathon ideas are designed to solve for like stuff that you can build in a day, and that's great. It's not designed to be a startup. That said, a lot of great startups emerge out of hackathons, but almost never directly. We look through the list of billion-dollar YC companies, and not a single one of them is literally the commercialization of an idea that started at a hackathon. Like, not a single one. So it's like super rare.
Not the idea, for sure.
Yeah, but a lot of the billion-dollar YC companies, the founders did hackathons. That's often where they met their co-founder. It's where they got good at building whole products. It's where they like learned how to build stuff and launch it. It's where they got exposed to like interesting technology that then like led in an indirect path down to the startup that they actually ended up starting.
I think the actual skill that I found is by hacking together.
Yeah.
And I think this is a very good source of meeting a potential co-founder, and in a very low-stake way, just feel each other and get your vibe of whether you really like building together and shipping together. And within 24 hours, it's a very quick turnaround. It's like, great. And then if you like working with together, you can like do other projects. It's like, great.
This is a partial list of all the billion-dollar YC companies that started with a terrible idea, and at some point, found their way to an actually good idea that is the idea that became a billion-dollar company. A lot of these are companies that you know. A bunch of them are BDD companies that you don't know, but they're all like huge companies. And
They're all like over $1 billion companies.
Yeah.
Some of these are public. And what we want to say, and don't want to discourage you after telling you all these like terrible ideas, maybe your startup is a terrible idea. Don't get discouraged, because even in the process of building some terrible startup idea, you learn so many special skills that are esoteric, like the Segment founders with building that classroom rating idea. They became experts in analytics and data pipelines. And they knew, oh, when you build a company, you need this kind of stuff. It's actually very valuable. So don't get discouraged and just get stuck in the ideation. We're doing so many office hour with students. I see so much overwhelm. It's like, oh, I gotta like get the idea ready, so I'm not gonna build until I have it ready theoretical. I actually say, throw that away. You're not gonna learn. Actually build and ship, and it's fine. I think what's more important and is in your control is you shipping and being in the keyword and putting code in and out, because that is what's gonna make you a more formidable founder. And all of them, the idea doesn't matter as much. We work with a lot of the founders and help them navigate that. But what we cannot teach you is how to code well.
yeah.
That you should like, that's in your control too. Like, you can become an awesome founder. Isn't that cool to know that you can do that? You can become fantastic builder. Like, all of them build bad ideas, but they were actually good products, but bad ideas.
And that's it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
If anyone has questions, we'll take a couple.
So I know you guys mentioned like startup ideas. mentioned like specific scenarios where they could be like still with it. So if you have an idea and you realize it's a target idea, is it worth it to keep working on it?
So if you have a target idea, is it worth it to continue to work on it? I'll give you a very specific answer. If you're working on an idea and you just realized, like in the last 15 minutes, oh shit, this is a target idea. Now what do I do? Here's the thing. Try to figure out why is it a target idea. Why has this not worked in the past? There's usually a subtle, like a part of the idea that is very hard in like a subtle and not obvious way that has caused all the earlier attempts to fail. Try to deeply understand that problem, and then try to figure out if you have a solution to the thing that has doomed all the previous efforts. Often, often you don't, and then maybe you should pivot, but maybe you've actually cracked this thing that other people haven't cracked. Another thing that you can do, you can try to find people who have worked on this idea before, and their thing failed, and you can literally just email them cold and ask them to tell you the story of their startup, and why it didn't work, and they will almost always be willing to do it. And that way you can learn a lot about previous attempts in this space, and you can be so much smarter, you can make a really informed decision about whether you want to continue with it or not.
And this is what we do a lot of YC when we advise founders that we know it's a perfect idea. We tell them, hey, talk to these alumni that this and that, and it failed. And we have this like Wikipedia in our head with all these failed startups, which is like secret knowledge because it's embarrassing to share it. So we just tell the founders when they're in the batch, it's like, oh, talk to such and such and such who actually failed. And they give them the honest, very candid, why. Sometimes they do, most of the time they do.
With the recent innovations in like space technology, like reusable rockets with SpaceX, is space infrastructure-based startups anything, or are they kind of still hard ideas?
No, I think space infrastructure stuff is really interesting.
Okay.
Like, there's a ton of interest in activity because like SpaceX changed everything, and now like cost to orbit is on like this crazy exponential down trajectory, which is just enabling all kinds of really cool stuff.
And it's hard stuff to build. It's not a target. This is like really hardcore
Really hard.
engineering.
Exactly.
We funded big companies like Relativity Space, Astranis, to name a few.
Oh yeah. So, okay.
3D printable rockets. It's cool.
Oh yeah.
That's a YC company.
They're really cool, yeah.
And Stoke Space, which is going to launch to orbit this year.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah.
You talked a lot about some bad startup ideas, like you said, the website to rate your professors, to rate your doctors are bad startup ideas.
Probably.
Could you give like a good reasoning, because I'm not able to understand why. I know they are bad ideas, but I don't have a reasoning why are they bad ideas.
Well, I think part of it is a bit more meta. I mean, there's two angles to look at it. You could build it at bottom up, and as Jared mentioned earlier, like you learn directly. You convince yourself. Don't just take their word for it. Talk to founders that build this and really fail at the startup. They can tell you. But do the work there. So just don't follow what we say. Do your homework. The other one, more if you look at it from top down, it's the survivorship bias that I was mentioning. Like, why is there no billion-dollar or public company building a professor rating system or a doctor rating system?
You're correct, though. We did not explain why those ideas are actually bad startup ideas, and the reason is it's a different reason for every idea. There's an idea-specific reason for each of these why they are target ideas. We didn't try to explain that because you actually have to understand the idea and the market like deeply and understand like sort of the fatal flaw. What we were trying to do was to give you a quick filter to detect things that are likely to be target ideas. That doesn't tell you why it's a target idea. To understand why it's a target idea, you have to go deep on that idea and understand why previous attempts have been.
So there's no set rules that differentiate good ideas from bad ideas, right? Like there's no set rules, like set filters, right?
Yeah, I think this is why this talk is a bit hard. Like the why is very circumstantial. Like we would have to spend a lot more time on it.
Okay.
But at least gives you the framework or the pattern.
Yeah, it does give me an idea. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah.
One of the main tracks is education at the HackMIT YC. So do you have any advice for avoiding target ideas when selling to like schools or teachers in the education space?
Yeah. Education is one of these things that like students, it's a little bit like the consumer versus B2B thing, where like the number of students that want to build education companies is like this, and the number of actually good education ideas is like this. So it's not zero, it's just like way, like the supply and demand is like way out of proportion on this one. And so if you really want to do something in education, you actually have to become, I would argue, a domain expert in education, and a domain expert not just in the student side of education, but probably in the school and institutional side of education, because most ed tech things sell to schools. And so under the common anti-patterns with ed tech ideas, is students build a thing that they themselves would want as students, but the customer is actually the school, and they don't really understand the customer. And so if that's the kind of thing that you're going for, and you want to do it, you got to like basically pivot your whole understanding and focus to get really deep in understanding the schools and what they buy and the purchasing cycles and all of this like school stuff that students don't tend to like really dig into.
How would you know if your idea is way too niche or specific to be successful?
I think we need more details for this.
So for example, with Vetco, vets for veterinarians, like cattle veterinarians. But what if you have like Vetco only for quadrupeds? That's even more specific, right? Can you have a market to be successful with that?
I mean, a lot of times when startups start, they actually start very, very new, which is good. And we work with companies to encourage them to solve a problem very, very nicely for like 10 person investment you. So it could be a good start, but I don't know enough details about that. You could grow it into other business.
All right, seems like people are trickling out. Should we take a last question? And then we'll be around at the booth in the back if anybody wants to chat afterwards. In the back.
Right, so with the constant generative AI and the ChatGPT and the GPT AI coming in, there is a possibility of so many startups. And there's a big wave of startups coming up. So how do you distinguish startups that are kind of going along the path of .com versus the things that are actually solving? How do you distinguish?
So lots of startups are getting built around generative AI, true, very competitive, and lots of startups are gonna die, true, yes. So it's kind of like back in 2010, lots of iPhone apps, sure, lots of apps, lots of them died, lots of them became just toys, but there were a number of them that became billion-dollar startups.
And so how do you distinguish between? How do you find out that this is not just another .com that is kind of
It goes back to whether it is solving a real problem. Does anybody know what YC's motto is? The four-word motto? Me. There you go. Oh. She's wearing it on her shirt. Make something people want.
Yes.
Yeah. And that is basically how to tell. Like, some LM ideas are solutions in search of a problem. They're just like cool technology, but they're not actually something people want. If you're making something that people want, and it just so happens that it's enabled by this LLM stuff, then that's really good. That's likely to be a good startup idea because it means something has changed in the world, and now it's possible to make something people want that you couldn't have made before.
I think you have to start with this. It's still a fun. All right, so if you want to keep talking to us, we'll be in the booth. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.